So the mainstream media is engaging in full-fledged both-siderism to try to diffuse the impact of the January 6th hearings. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So what prompted this video is a column by Gary Abernathy in the Washington Post. And as always, I'll post a link to that article down below, entitled The January 6th Hearing Slippery Slope. From the beginning, I knew what this article was going to be about, and Abernathy did not disappoint. Let me just read a little bit from the article here. But just before wrapping up, the committee's real raison d'etre became clear, courtesy of an exchange between Chairman Benny G. Thompson, D. Mississippi, and star witness J. Michael Luttig, a retired federal judge. Thompson clued up Luttig, a prominent old-school conservative, with a request to, quote, share your thoughts on the ongoing threat. Luttig, who had been halting and deliberate throughout the afternoon, suddenly was more animated. Now, just to step back for a second, I just want to remind people that Luttig was a Republican who was appointed to the bench by George Bush. Quote, Donald Trump and his allies and supporters, Luttig declared, are a clear and present danger to American democracy. Elaborating, Luttig warned that these, quote, allies and supporters are determined to, quote, attempt to overturn the 2024 election in the same way that they attempted to overturn the 2020 election, but succeed in 2024 where they failed in 2020. Oh my goodness. Could you believe the outrage that Abernathy had over Luttig saying that it wasn't just Donald Trump, it was Donald Trump and his supporters? In his argument, he goes on to claim that after the 2016 election, lots of Democrats refused to acknowledge Donald Trump as the legitimate president, and that we have, in our party, a left-wing socialist movement that is just as extreme as what the conservatives are claiming. Well, let's take a look at these claims point by point. First of all, he's right about the fact that many Democrats were outraged and disappointed when Donald Trump was elected president. But by the same token, we never did anything to stop him from taking office. And in fact, let me remind him that Hillary Clinton conceded to Donald Trump the day after the election, when it became clear that he had actually won the Electoral College vote, despite the fact that she had won the popular vote by a large margin. Now, in terms of Democrats then stepping up and saying that Donald Trump is not a legitimate president, nobody said that. They did say, though, that a system that allowed the person who won a minority of the votes to be elected over the person who won the majority of the votes is a system that needs reforming. Similarly, these critics, myself included, have pointed out how the conservative bias in the Senate is also something that needs to be reformed. And that, combined with the aggressive gerrymandering that Republicans have engaged in, has resulted in the fact that Republicans maintain control of the federal government even when they lose the popular vote, oftentimes by substantial margins. In fact, it's quite shocking, given the fact that Donald Trump lost the popular vote by over 7 million votes, that it was still considered a relatively close election, and that Republicans actually narrowed their disadvantage in the House and were able to essentially maintain parity in the Senate. Certainly no Democrats took the position that we should somehow manipulate the system and violate the law to keep the Democrats in office, even though Donald Trump had won a minority of the vote. And finally, by way of comparison, we had the example of the Virginia gubernatorial election, where prior to the election, Glenn Youngkin was claiming that the Democrats who were in power while he was running for office were going to manipulate the system to keep him from taking office. Well, what happened? He narrowly won the election, and what happened? He was allowed to take office despite his claims to the contrary. So this claim that somehow the Democrats' response to losing elections is anything like the Republican response to losing elections is hogwash. Democrats fundamentally accept the results of elections, even when they don't like them, while Republicans want to literally destroy the system when they don't get the result they like. Secondly, Abernathy claims that this is just a problem isolated with Donald Trump, and yet the gubernatorial nominee in Pennsylvania was actually involved in the January 6th insurrection. And he continues to maintain that Donald Trump won the last election. despite the fact that his state voted by a substantial margin for Joe Biden. And numerous candidates for Secretary of State and other statewide offices across the country, including here in my home state of Michigan, have as their Republican nominees candidates who espouse the fact that they would not have allowed the actual results of the vote in their state to decide who the electors would be. In other words, they want to stand in the way of Joe Biden getting the electors he won, generally speaking, by substantial margins in each of their states. And this is just the week after the Texas Republican Convention. And let me remind folks, Texas is such a large state that were it not for the votes of Texas for Republican candidates, Democrats would be firmly in control of the federal government. So the 5,100 delegates to the Texas Republican Convention specifically included in their platform a provision stating that Biden's win was illegitimate. And their attorney general joined in a lawsuit trying to deny the counting of electoral votes from states such as Pennsylvania and, of course, my home state of Michigan, which were narrowly won by Biden. So this is not some minority view that's simply ascribed to by Donald Trump. This is a wholesale anti-democratic movement, and by anti-democratic, I'm referring to anti-democratic with a small d, an anti-democratic movement that permeates the Republican Party from top to bottom. And the truth of the matter is, as we've seen in many states, where you have Republicans who don't ascribe to this extreme ideology, they get defeated by the grassroots. So Abernathy's claim fails on that point as well. Now, I'm not claiming, by the way, that if the Republicans do take control of the House, that they probably won't engage in witch hunts. I mean, they've done it before, as they did with the Benghazi hearings. But for anyone who's paid attention to what the January 6th committee is doing, it's clear, number one, that this committee is engaging in a bipartisan effort, and number two, that the evidence against Donald Trump and all of these people who were helping him was overwhelming. This was a wholesale, illegal conspiracy aimed at destroying American democracy. And to somehow try to claim that, oh, it's just like what the Democrats did, and it's just a few bad apples within the Republican Party, is ignoring the facts. Well, if you like this video, why don't you check out this other video I did over here a little while ago, talking about just how extreme the Republican Party has become. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.